Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, we're screening Joseph von Sternberg's The Last Command, starring Emil Jannings, who won the first Academy Award for Best Actor for his role. This is considered one of the masterpieces of the late silent cinema, and it's set during and after the Russian Revolution. We'll be talking about that and much more after today's screening. Joining us once again on City Cinematheque is our good friend, Professor Marc Dolan, a noted expert on the Hollywood studio system and on how history is represented in film. Now, enjoy this look at Hollywood and the Russian Revolution in The Last Command. Welcome back. Well, Hollywood agreed with the ending of this film. He was a great actor, and that's why Emil Jannings won the first Academy Award for acting. There's a lot to unpack about this film. It comes in a very important moment in Hollywood, 1928, important for a number of different reasons. And we're here to explore those things with a good friend of City Cinematheque, a colleague here at CUNY, Professor Marc Dolan. Marc has published widely on American film and the American entertainment industry. Many people might know him primarily for his extraordinary book on The Boss, on Bruce Springsteen, but he's also worked on the Hollywood film industry and from a number of different angles. Welcome back, Marc.
Pleasure to be here.
Great. So let's talk about what Hollywood is in 1928, including, has Hollywood recently become Hollywood, or?
Hollywood is about in the way the country understands it, in the way that that opening title card tells us. Hollywood is about 6 years old at this point. I mean, the first film of any kind to be shot in Hollywood was 1910.
Okay.
The first feature film shot in Hollywood was 1914, which was DeMille's The Squaw Man.
Okay.
This film comes out of the Paramount studio, a lot that was inconceivable in 1914. And in fact, when they opened it in 1926, they actually took the barn in which DeMille had filmed The Squaw Man and moved it about a mile and a half across town to the new Paramount lot as they were erecting the famous gate on Melrose. Right. And so this is Hollywood. Really, I think in 22, with the premiere of Robin Hood at the Egyptian, is when you first start having people talk about Hollywood as Hollywood. James Cruise directs a film called Hollywood in 23. With the fan magazines, Hollywood is now widely seen as, it says in the title card, the Mecca of the world.
Okay, okay. So let's dive into the fact that this is a self-reflexive film, right? I mean, yeah.
There were a number of them, and you also have show people coming out around this time. People, I think, because of the fan magazine boom, people were interested in how Hollywood became Hollywood, or how movies got made, seeing behind the curtain. So, the first reel of this is Hollywood,
right? And
the last reel or so is Hollywood, and in between we have the Russian section. But no, the backwash of the world. We're told the extras are.
So let's go back to the fact that this is now known in many ways as a Joseph von Sternberg film. It's a highly regarded film.
Yeah.
So, as obviously I programmed it for that reason, and is thought to be one of the major, late silent films using the vocabulary of silent film to great effect, and again under the moniker of Joseph von Sternberg. And that all comes out of auteurism.
Yes.
In that, and one of the major American auteurist theorists, Andrew Sarris, of course, writes a book on...
Exactly.
So it becomes this. But there's another way of looking at this, right?
Well, there's the fact, Sternberg also, if you read his autobiography, Fun in the Chinese Laundry, he makes every decision from this movie his own decision. Okay. Now, it is undeniable, if you look at later Sternberg films, like The Devil is a Woman or Shanghai Express, they're unequivocally coming out of one vision.
Okay.
Even Salvation Hunters, which is the independent film he makes before this in 24, which is a remarkable movie, but it's clearly one vision. This comes out of a studio.
Okay.
The Last Command is an example of a good studio. And if you go back to when they first started using the term auteur in French criticism. What they meant was somebody who had their own flavor in the studio
Right.
system. And in that sense, it's an auteur film, not because it all comes from Sternberg, but because he used the tools to his advantage. If you look at the scale of this movie,
Yeah, please.
when they parade for the Czar, now, 4 years before, Sternberg is making Salvation Hunters on no money. I think it was like 5,000 or something like that. He's shooting in real locations with minimal money. You can't have all those costumes, all those extras, if you're not in a studio lot. Right. And Paramount is the class deal in 28. Right. MGM and Warner Brothers are only about 4 years old. They're coming up. But Paramount is really what feature film in Hollywood was based around. So you have B.P. Schulberg as head of West Coast production, who maneuvers all the pieces around and gets people to work with it. You have an arrangement that they have with UFA in Germany, which allows Emil Jannings to come over and to do a number of films for them there. You also have, I think, the unsung hero of this picture, Herman Mankiewicz, who is credited up front with titles. Now, titles means every line of dialogue you see printed and every stage direction. Right. There is a level of snark that is in the titles, particularly in the Hollywood section, that Sternberg gives it that over-emotionalism. Okay. I have no doubt that the relationship between Jannings and Evelyn Brent is very much flavored by Sternberg, including the secret code of cigarettes and how if power relationships come through. Is it your cigarette? Is it their cigarette? Are you lighting it? Is someone else lighting it? You see this also even in Dietrich's screen test for Blue Angel. It's all about the cigarettes. But the satire of Hollywood and the titles in this, and even like that last play of he wasn't just a great actor, he was a great man. This gives me Mankiewicz's flavor. Now Mankiewicz, understand, has only been in Hollywood 2 years himself. Walter Wanger hires him on the East Coast, sends him out to Schulberg. Mankiewicz is a member of the Algonquin Round Table. He famously recruits as many New York writers as he can to come west. The famous telegram to Ben Hack to come out here. Your only competition there is idiots. Right. And in the space of, I think, 2 years, he writes the titles for 2 or 3 dozen films. Wow. And they all have this very urban, sophisticated air about them that Hecht also fits into. I mean, Daryl Zanuck is writing title cards like crazy over at Warner Brothers at this point, but they don't have that same flavor. You can tell when Mankiewicz wrote. I mean, in fact, I think the most amazing deal is that he did the title cards for Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And Anita Luce was one of the best title card writers earlier. Right. But this gives a voice as much as the cinematography gives a voice to the film. In other words, there are shots in this. Nobody can shoot a close-up like Sternberg and have a person in a real setting and make them seem as if they're floating in the ether. He was very good at that. Right. But the other flavor that's coming through this is the flavor of the title cards, and it's very much Herman Mankiewicz's work. Yeah. Well, that's also because this is a film that has this really remarkable tonal mixture. Yes. Because, as you just pointed out, structurally, you've got a first and the third act, which are set in satirically set. I mean, in a Hollywood, showing you the backstage and what's the real dream of being an extra? What's it like to be an extra? Well, it's like being part of the worst aspects of factory capitalism. Where the worker is only as good as they can be moved through the system to produce things on time. And the costuming is shown as a mass production line. Absolutely. That you are moving down the costume line. Absolutely. It's interesting. The same year, Robert Florey makes a short expressionist film that is also about like the life of an extra. So clearly, it's on the minds of everybody who's working in Hollywood. Right. And of course, that's also part of the creation of Hollywood. Is it becomes a company town? Yes. In which everybody at least claims to be related in one way or another. Well, there's the joke from a couple of decades ago about how you could go to L.A. and you go to the supermarket and walk up to anybody and saying, "How's your second act going?" Yes, exactly. Have you solved the problems? Because everybody was trying to write a 3-act thing. And so this jumps into that thing of what is this really like out here?
this new thing called Hollywood that we're all crazy about, because we're all going to the movies all the time, and the paraphernalia surrounding the movies has expanded in print and radio culture, extraordinarily.
Well, the town has boomed in recent memories. I mean, as I say, 1910, it was a bad place to grow oranges. There was not really anything like this, but the entire economy of not just Hollywood, but all of Los Angeles County becomes based around this. And, it's one of the reasons why you mentioned the Academy Awards. It's one of the reasons why we have the establishment of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, which is, I don't think I get in trouble saying this a century later, one of the greatest and most charming ways to try to bust a union. Because
explain that to our readers.
Okay. The one union that was able to get in was the stagehands union. And the reason they were able to do that in the mid-20s was because of the fact that they represented not only the people on the lot, but also the projectionists.
Okay.
So they could shut down both ends, and they had started as a theatrical union. They could shut down both ends of the process. So they got a contract very quickly. Shortly after they got that contract, Louis B. Mayer, among others, said, we need to forestall any more of this union establishment. So they create the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, which is supposed to give people a voice in the governing of the fact is, if you look at the people who were at the first meeting in the actors division, over half of them produced their own films.
Okay.
So really, it's the producers being in charge. But after they had established this and they had fought back some unionization, even prior to the Great Depression, they said, maybe we should give out some awards, which is how you get...
Okay. So that's how, and one of the things about this film is being shown on City Cinematheque as part of a series called Hollywood 1928, and we're being able in our series to show this film, which has the Academy Award for Best Actor, a Street Angel Academy Award for Best Actress, White Shadows in the South Seas Academy Award for best cinematography.
Yeah.
So they're consolidating their own brand.
Exactly. And, in the first year, that first year also is the one time they actually had dual Best Picture winners. And you have Wings and Sunrise, which people seek them out there online. Those are two films from the silent period that when I show them to undergraduates, they're just blown away by
Sure,
them.
absolutely.
Because they were rewarding good work.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we don't want to do it. In that sense, it really is. I mean, you're promoting your brand, but you're promoting it competitively, and you're promoting, well, wait a minute, there should be competition here to see who can be better.
Exactly. And it creates more of as a company town, everybody basically knew everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody went to Doug and Mary's. So as a result, it becomes a way to celebrate each other.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about the fact that, here you have this provincial, call it provincial California city, area, et cetera, that all of a sudden over a 20 to 30 year period, actually, because of the growth of Hollywood, first in the silent era, really becomes this cosmopolitan implantation, because in the silent era, if you have a talented person from the German, from the Swedish, from the French, from anywhere, they're equally talented in silent cinema. So that's how. So tell us how Emil Jannings gets there.
Well, Emil Jannings gets there because there is an arrangement between UFA and Paramount that they cross-promote and distribute.
And who's UFA? To
Sorry,
people who don't know.
It's the main film studio in Germany,
and which is an extremely sophisticated film industry at this particular moment. Yes.
But during the course of the 1920s, Hollywood gradually stole all their best directors.
Yeah.
Because first Lubitsch comes over, recruited directly by Mary Pickford.
Right.
And then you have Jannings come over as an actor. Right. You then later have Murnau come over, who of course directs Sunrise. Right. So why do you want to come to, even if you work at one of the best movie studios in Germany, why do you want to come to New York? I mean, not New York, Hollywood. It's because of the resources.
Thank you.
You have everything here. You can build anything here. You can get any kind of actor here.
Right.
So Louis B. Mayer recruits Greta Garbo from Sweden.
Right.
All the best people will come here, so you get to work with the best people.
Right. So this is part of the self-reflexivity of this film is that this is a film a film about a superproduction.
Yes.
Yeah. But also the making of the superproduction and what that says about again somebody who's in exile and impoverished and is now part of this labor flow at the lowest level initially.
Yeah.
And then is picked. Is picked out of the pictures in that extraordinary first scene of here's the pictures of all the Russians in Hollywood. People see this film, it is most likely, if they're seeing this film, they know a later William Powell. They certainly know Nick Charles. They know the Thin Man, and then any number of his other extraordinary roles. This is a William Powell who's not so well known.
Well, it's a turning point in his career.
Well, tell us about that.
And in some ways, he and Jannings are crossing each other.
Okay.
Because of the fact that Powell, first film, he plays a henchman in Barrymore's Sherlock Holmes.
Okay.
He plays a devious lord in When Knighthood Was in Flower, opposite Marion Davies, and then he plays another devious lord in Romola.
Okay.
He basically looks a little shifty. If you look at him in this movie, you wonder why he was never cast as Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah. No, a very good point.
And but he has that sort of evil side to him. 2 years before this, and this is one of those lost films I wish we hadn't lost, he played George Wilson in the first film version of The Great Gatsby.
Oh, okay.
So, the service station owner, rough trade, absolutely, you can pass it. But you also look at this man and you know that he has never uttered a stupid word in his life because of the way his face moves, the way his eyes move. Just after this, he gets cast as the most popular fictional detective in the United States in the 1920s, which is Philo Vance.
Right.
He makes 3 Philo Vance pictures for Paramount, and what's really lucky about it is the first one starts as silent and then moves into sound. And he has a voice that is made for sound. Now, viewers of a certain generation may have first encountered it by Don Adams' voice for Maxwell Smart. Actually, that began as a parody of William Powell, but he can rattle off things like crazy.
Absolutely.
And the thing that makes him a good Nick Charles, which goes back to these parts in the 20s, is the thing about Nick Charles is he works well on both sides of the culture. Nick Charles can hang out with criminals, and Nick Charles can at least attend high society functions.
Right.
And you believe that with Powell.
Right.
And he dives into this role. He has to be essentially subtle. Everything he does in this role is raise an eyebrow.
Right. Well, yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to Jannings, who, this is my favorite of Jannings' performance. I mean, he's in The Last Laugh, which is one of the great silent movies.
Sure.
More now. But the thing I love about this film is the range of expressions you get on Jannings' face.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, they probably didn't shoot in sequence. So the fact that he had to be so, sure of himself in the beginning of the Russian sequences and just so crushed with that, where he decides to start doing that tick.
Right.
And when it begins. So Jannings, is made for silence. And of course, he falls out of favor in the 30s, in part because of the fact that he can't do work in Hollywood because his German accent is so strong. Right. It's not charming like Garbo's accent.
Right.
It's just impenetrable. He also becomes involved with the Nazi Party, but that's a different story. But Powell is already doing this work where you spot him in every movie, and then you let him use his voice. And that voice is just, he can make the most ridiculous things sound intelligent when he speaks.
Well, and he also, thank you for bringing that up, because one of the things that when I'm teaching early sound, one of the things I talk to about students is I said, you can't understand the impact because the distribution of Hollywood cinema is absolutely in place globally. And then sound comes, it takes a couple of years for the conversion around the world. Okay. But and all of a sudden, people are hearing American English
exactly
in a way they have never. They're now hearing it on 78 records as well, and they're beginning to hear it on certain radio broadcasts. But people like Cagney and Bogart and William Powell define the American language for audiences, because I think, wait a minute, this is not British English.
Yes.
This is, and there's a range of expressivity here that is very different. What is this new language spoken by the Americans? And he's one of the people who helps define that.
And it's specifically an urban language, because
Correct.
this coincides with the fact that 1920 is the first U.S. census in which more U.S. citizens live in cities than in rural areas.
Okay.
So this is the one historian has a book about this period called The Urban Nation. The mid-20th century is when the United States is its most urban.
Right.
And so this also brings in not only the actors you've named, but it brings in Herman Mankiewicz, and it brings in Ben Hecht, and it brings in all these New York writers who go west, because they're giving this notion of this is how people speak in the United States.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, we de-emphasized something that I'd like to come back to just for a moment, and that is, let's talk about this as a von Sternberg film.
Okay.
Please,
Absolutely.
please. So, I mean, what characteristic of von Sternberg, what is his contribution in that way, you know, including his extraordinary visual sense?
Okay, first off, it may concern a recent political event, but the politics are incoherent.
Okay.
But Sternberg never cares about politics.
Yeah, okay, good.
But the ideology is clear, that this is about power.
Okay.
And it's about, I mean, I'm not saying it's quite bondage, and it's not as extreme as you'll get in something like Blonde Venus. But the idea is this is about how people's power relationships shift and how they control each other. It also points toward things like Shanghai Express Devils, The Woman, Blonde Venus, in that if you tried to give a summary of the character's actions, people would start giggling, and yet it makes sense.
When you're watching it.
When you're watching it, it makes sense. Right. But Evelyn Brent's character in this movie, her shifts in behavior, they only make sense if you're this feverish Sternbergian notion of people are pushed and pulled by, you know, very strong passions. And no disrespect to Evelyn Brent, who had also played the lead in Sternberg's Underworld.
Right.
With a script by Ben Hecht. She makes you buy it as much as you can. Right. But the whole notion, if you stop and think about it for a second, okay, she's the most dangerous revolutionist in Russia, so let's invite her to stay with us for a week where we're making our plans. And again, but you buy it in the Sternbergian world because it's about the intensity of the emotions. As I say, you can watch the cigarettes, the politics of cigarettes in this movie, the ideology of cigarettes, and it's like who's in charge, who's not in charge.
Right.
And so it becomes a film not about the Russian Revolution, not even about Hollywood, quite frankly, but it becomes a film about two things. One is sympathy for those who are under the heel of power. On both sides of the equation. And it becomes this fascinating meta issue, and I'll give this to Sternberg, probably not Mank, about how everyone is acting at some point. That, in other words, what ties the two parts of the film together, and I have no problem believing that Sternberg was the person who came up with this, is that, you know, they are acting for the Czar.
Absolutely correct.
And other people are acting for Jannings' character.
Right.
So it becomes about we are all putting on shows for other people, and we are all subjected to power or we become powerful.
Right.
There is no sympathy, as you would have in some later Sternberg movies, there is no sympathy here for the people who are in charge, who are like being inconsiderate.
Right.
Powell's most compassionate scene or most sympathetic scene is the one where he's saying, can't you understand the way you're treating this young soldier?
How would you, how much do you find this to be of a piece with von Sternberg's stylistics?
Nobody shoots a close-up like him.
Okay.
In other words, again, the close-ups particularly, the interesting thing is with Jannings, I think a lot of the work there is being done by the actor. The way he shoots Brent, it's not quite Dietrich shots, but it's like the intensity of her face and the way you just close in on that frame just around her head. You don't have the same kind of extreme low-key lighting that you'll get in later Sternbergs. But you do get that framing and just lingering on it. Also, all the dissolves, I would say, visually. Yeah. A lot of what you see, particularly in the opening Hollywood section, would have been done with cuts. But he does dissolve. So you're getting this flavor. And it's, the funny thing about this movie is I would almost call it his most realistic movie.
Yeah, okay.
Because his other movies aren't realistic or try to be.
And he is, we're going to have to stop here, but just to end on a very good point you just made, that he's demystifying the very process itself. He's showing the device. I mean, he's, he's showing you how you get a costume, okay? And many, many other things. So, if you'd like to be interested in many, many other things concerning the cinema, there's a place to do so. Staying here over the weekends while we're screening other films on City Cinematheque. How do you find out about us? No surprise, many of you already know this. You visit our website. Go to www.tv.cuny.edu. Now there you're going to find ways to stream past episodes of City Cinematheque. You're going to find our schedule for the future. You're going to find ways to communicate with us. And you're going to find all the information about the other programming, rich programming here at CUNY TV. But you can't be at home. We've got a solution to that. We now have an app. If you go to the website, you will find the way in which you can download the CUNY TV app and you can stream us from anywhere. That vacation in Hawaii, why not stream CUNY TV while you're there? So please visit www.tv.cuny.edu. Marc, always a pleasure to mine your extraordinary knowledge of Hollywood and its system. Look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Great. And thank you for joining us here today on City Cinematheque. And please join us again in the future as we continue our strolls through the archives of film history. For now, it's goodbye.